I think perhaps it might be good to start, thank you Jason, by just talking about a kind of a bit more background about Falun Gong and the kind of cultural and historical context. Maybe you can start us off there, Jason, and if you want to add anything, please feel free. We've only got 2 mics, so it's going to be a bit passing around, but
we'll share.
We'll share.
So I guess I have the mic, so I'll start. So Falun Gong, in China, there were traditionally these different types of self-improvement practices. Nowadays, people see things called Qigong that has these kind of slow-moving exercises. In China, traditionally, there were many different types of these self-improvement or self-refinement practices. They kind of fell out of favor once the Communist Party took control in 1949 because it was an officially atheist Marxist regime that sort of enforced that belief system on other people. And so what you saw were that the Buddhist temples were destroyed, monks were forced to marry, they kind of just were at odds with religion and such immediately. But what happened in the aftermath of the Cultural Revolution, which really quite devastated China, was they allowed a sort of resurgence of these practices, but under the banner of something now called Qigong. So they had sort of some of these roots in these practices, but they were no longer talking about religion or spirituality or things that would unnerve the communist rulers who were concerned sort of about ideological control. So Falun Gong emerged as the most popular of these Qigong practices that emerged after the Cultural Revolution. And it was publicly introduced in 1992. It has origins, the idea I think is that it was passed on from sort of one student to one disciple over a period of time, but then it was popularized in 1992 and spread very quickly. So Falun Gong became the most popular of them. There were estimates saying that there were tens of millions or potentially even 100 million people practicing it at the time. And this was within 7 years by the time the ban happened. So like 1999, it had first emerged in 1992. And then you have people that potentially outnumber even membership in the Communist Party. And I think because of the Communist Party's sort of concern around, ideological control, this was seen as a potential threat. And hence the sort of repression that escalated to a full-blown persecution campaign against Falun Gong in 1999.
Sorry, now I've monopolized all microphones.
This is so interesting, and I would really like to ask all of the questions that I have on these various pieces of paper, but I'm also aware of the time, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to open the floor to a couple of questions. So I'm giving you all a warning now. I'm about to do that. We're probably only going to have time for maybe 1 or 2, but while you all think of what those questions are, I'm going to just ask Margaret and Benjamin a couple more, so it gives you time. I'm giving a warning. Benjamin, with the kind of context that we're seeing both in terms of the film that we've just watched, but also what's going on in the media and in public and political discourse in Iceland at the moment with regards to the recent potential terrorism activity and the discussion that has opened in terms of increasing police powers in Iceland. As far as we are here from Chinese Communist Party rule, what do you think the state of affairs is in terms of freedom of expression and power of state and police in Iceland, and what should we be aware of in terms of protecting our freedoms here?
That's a softball question. I think one thing that Margaret mentioned before about sort of the impact of the Falun Gong visit the first time around was that Icelandic society wasn't really prepared for it. It just came so suddenly and it was so severe, like just an internment of 70 innocent people in a gym hall somewhere is just ridiculous. But the political party that carried it out, and the political party that has been pushing constantly for the increased weaponization of police, is the same political party, for example, also that has been stifling free press in Iceland for years and years. I mean, one cannot speak about press freedom in Iceland without mentioning the current finance minister, who not only had publication of his own financial dealings before the press stopped, just weeks before an election, but is also currently making fun of journalists who are under investigation by a policewoman who is a member of his own political party. It's just the direction that the pressure for weaponization of police is coming from is just it just bears mention where we're getting this idea from. I mean, their horniness for more weapons for police just it's not really news. But every case where we hear anything about any kind of threat is always used by this, and the current Justice Minister is just an extreme example of it. Plus, obviously, his sidekick. It also bears mention, perhaps, that the guy who has been proposing on behalf of the police, Jón Bjartmars, the guy who was the head of some people may have forgotten this, but a couple of years ago, several hundred machine guns were being imported to Iceland without public discussion. Turns out that the police had requested them, but in the end didn't get them because the public found out about it when it was stopped. The guy who had requested that and had run that operation for the police and who had been advocating for years to get machine guns into police cars is also the guy who wanted the hard treatment during the 2008-2009 demonstrations during the crash. So the current, history about possible terror that probably isn't given the way that it's been sort of like these questions have been answered in the media. It's not really clear that there was anything going on there. But the willingness to get guns is just completely unrelated to that.
I want to finish my questions by asking Margaret, in terms of the more international outlook of Iceland. Is Iceland a good ally in terms of international human rights, and what more could be done by both our politicians and our citizens in order to support people like the Falun Gong practitioners around the world?
Well, compared to many other countries, the situation in Iceland is pretty good. And I've even been told, because I've actually been present when Iceland has been up for review by many UN committees, like the Committee on operating under the Convention on Civil and Political Rights. And I've been told more than once, when Iceland is up, we just lay back because there's so little to complain about. But having said that, we need to do better, certainly. And one of the issues that Iceland has been stressing in the international sphere is, for example, human rights violations in China and in the Philippines. Also gender-based violence and Resolution 1325, which is actually women's participation in building up societies after conflict. Also gender equality and LGBTI rights. We also want, or we are trying to promote, or to have Iceland also promote actions against hate speech, because we feel that we need an international effort. What we are seeing in the world today, it's just like you're describing in China. Well, I'm thinking we have maybe not this dire situation in many other countries, but certainly we have Russia also with, well, fake news. It's something that's very much, being discussed today, and unfortunately far too many people actually listen to fake news and never criticize anything. And what I feel also to be so important is that we always keep our vigil. Like you were saying, we have to guard our values, and we can just never lay back and think, well, everything's fine, nothing can.
Can't be complacent.
We don't have to worry, because as soon as we do that, we always see a regression.
And we've got time for another question. Have we got any other takers? It's a bit quiet there, Christian.
Yes, because you, thank you.
You're also developing other screenings, but you're also developing a VR hub and other projects related to your film. I just want to know more about that and why are you doing this? I'm curious about that.
I didn't put Christian up to this, but he's kindly asking for the related media that we're producing. Part of it was just a creative way to be able to make what we're doing. As an independent company, it's difficult. We had some track record in the digital space, so part of what we did to support the filmmaking process is also we put together some projects on the digital side of things, but we also feel very excited about their ability to sort of expand the experience of what you have here. So I think a lot of people see the art, they see there's a unique artistic process. We didn't get into that so much today, but you know, we had to take the 2D illustrations that Dashong does and give you that 3D, you know, the opening shot, where there's like 5 minutes without a cut where you're moving through. We had a unique production process to take his 2D illustrations and bring them into a 3D space. And a lot of people who see that, they're interested and they want to be sort of part of that creative process. So we have an Apple Pencil app that's coming out where you can be sort of like a background artist for us and color some of these backgrounds while you learn a little bit about the production process that went into them. So that's one sort of related media. On the VR front, I work in, I think it's maybe an attention deficit issue I have, but I work across different mediums all the time. Like we're into games and animation and documentaries, and all that combination was helpful and obviously in this film. But VR, I find, I'm excited about it, but I find it very different from narrative storytelling in a film, because when you're directing a film, you can control the shot, you can control the frame. So if you want to communicate certain emotions, you can work with a close-up shot, and that, you know, helps you to get close to the character. If you're in VR and you use a close-up shot, it's just someone standing right in your face, and it makes you feel very uncomfortable. And you also don't typically have this kind of external character that you're empathizing with. In a film, you have, you know, a main character and other characters that you get to know them, and you're kind of putting your emotions through them. In VR, you are that point of focus. It's all from your point of view. So it really is difficult, I think, for narrative storytelling, but what it's very powerful for as a result of these characteristics is that I think it's very, very useful for putting yourself into someone else's shoes. And so what we've done is we've taken part of the story of Mr. White that doesn't appear in the film and told a sort of like from beginning to end of what his whole experience was like. There's elements there that we don't touch on in the film, like his wife was standing across the street when he was arrested, and what was his, you know, this separation that he experienced, all of these different things that were part of his journey. I think, and what is it like being interrogated when people are coming at you with electric batons? I mean, it's intense, but if you really want to understand what it's like for someone who's been through these things and been through this type of experience, the empathy you get from VR is very, very powerful. So we have a 12 to 13 minute VR film that we're just finishing. We'll put out into the festival circuit as well on the VR side of things, and I think it's another entry point for people, you know, who may not be, you know, documentary lovers who go to see docs all the time, but maybe they're in the VR space and they can experience what these people have been enduring and be exposed to their story as well through a different means.
Awesome.
Thank you.